Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today we are going over my top 5 most overpowered ships. Some of these are tech line ships, some of these are premium ships, some of these are reward ships. Either way, they're a little bit too strong, in my opinion, and in many of you guys' opinion as well. So let's go ahead and get right on into it. Well, before we do actually, if you did not see yesterday's video, my super secret mission last week was sneaking out to Hawaii, to Pearl Harbor, in order to check out the USS Missouri, the second Iowa class I have visited in my time here on this earth. So if you have an interest in Pearl Harbor or the Missouri, make sure you check out yesterday's video. Link to it will be somewhere around here. But now, let's go ahead and get on into the list. Coming in at number 5, we have the Tier 10 Tech Line Italian battleship, the Colombo, under the conditions of her having the unique upgrade and Sansonetti equipped on her as a commander. Those two push the Colombo into being pretty much broken, in my humble opinion. Why? So, the Colombo is armed with 16 15-inch guns that are armed with SAP, semi-armor piercing shells. And these shells don't really care too much about armor as long as they can penetrate it, which they can penetrate pretty much everything shy of actual belt armor at their tier, which means that when you get a decent number of these shells just hitting the target really just about anywhere, again, with the exception of belt armor, you're ripping the target for 10, 15, 20k easily. On Colombo, normally. Once you slap the unique upgrade on it, which gives you a 6% buff to the dispersion and a 6% buff to the reload time of the guns, you are at that point typically landing more shells than not with the Colombo. The unique upgrade essentially fixes the dispersion, if you will, to give the Colombo more consistent dispersion, which means it's easier to aim and know where the shells are going to go, which of course again leads to more shells on target. Which means anyone that's played the Colombo for a decent amount of time with the unique upgrade, you can very easily land shots for 20, 25k with the Colombo, regardless of the angle of the target ship. It is absolutely frustrating, beyond frustrating really, to be on the receiving end of a Colombo with a unique upgrade slapped on it. Because it always feels like it doesn't matter what you do or what ship you're in, you're getting chunked for like 20k a salvo against the Colombo. It's pretty devastating. Now you throw Sansonetti on there, and then you're really cooking with gas with the Colombo. Because after you get a single kill in your Colombo, you now have extended range thanks to Sansonetti, fixing another shortcoming of the Colombo, which is her range. And of course, if you equip the spotter plane in your Colombo as well, you can get your range out a little bit further, which, again, that coupled with Sansonetti, just, I mean, yeah, at that point, the world's your oyster. You're chunking fools for, 20k, 25k from across the map. Well, maybe not across the map in some cases, but far and away than where you normally would be in a Colombo without Sansonetti or without the unique upgrade. Let alone, the fact that the Colombo is a fairly tanky ship from a bow-end perspective. You get the 360-degree turrets on the rear turrets with the Colombo, and you get that lovely exhaust smoke consumable. So when things do get a little bit too spicy on your flank, you can just pop that, smoke up, and run away into the night. It's a great tool for disengaging from the enemy team when you need to heal up, or again, the situation has just not necessarily evolved into a winnable outcome for you. Now, the Colombo is at number 5 because in order to get it to this point, you of course do need to have the unique upgrade, and you need to have Sansonetti equipped on your Colombo. A normal Colombo definitely isn't anywhere near busted, but slapping that unique upgrade and Sansonetti on the Colombo does make her quite busted, in my humble opinion. And just, again, if you think not, think about that next time you run into a Colombo, you start chunking for 20k every salvo. Now, thankfully, of course, the damage saturation mechanic is a thing in game, so there is only so many times a Colombo can do this to you. But typically when you get to the point to where the damage saturation is kicking in, you ain't got too much ship left anyway at that point. So, yeah, Colombo's a little cracked right now. Will they crank her back? Probably not, because she did spend many of her years in World Warships being considered to be one of the lesser desirable tier 10 ships. So there is that with her. But anyway, yeah, that's why she's at number 5. You do need the unique upgrade and Sansonetti on her to get her to this point. All right, coming on down now, we have our number 4 slot, which is the tier 9 experimental Soviet cruiser, the Vyazma. Now, we had a whole video on this ship a couple of days ago, so I won't spend too much time on her, but I do believe this is one of the most busted ships in the game right now. Why? It's a tier 9 Soviet cruiser with 16-inch guns. Now, it is essentially, not essentially, it is the Borodino shifted over to a cruiser slot and up to tier 9 and giving, the fighter flight mechanic that gives you the improved dispersion and improved reload time, the lower your HP bar is, and that does stack with the normal adrenaline rush, and you get the limited shells that have the improved penetration angles on top of the normal Soviet shell ballistics, right, and a shorter fuse time. So, yeah, a cruiser with 16-inch guns at tier 9, which means in that matchmaker bracket, you can very well get put into a tier 7 game. And 16-inch guns at tier 7 are just godly, because you don't care about anyone else's armor scheme, because you can overmatch all the major armor thresholds in tier 7, and you give that ability to this cruiser that's basically on a Stalingrad hull, which is a pretty dang tanky cruiser hull. So now you can just bully tier 7 ships with your 16-inch guns, with your fighter flight skill kicking in there for improved dispersion, and you have the limited ammunition burst fire mode where you can just absolutely dumpster on any tier 7 ship. I mean, like, the Vyazma is a very strong tier 9 ship. Like, let alone, being stuck in tier 7 matchmaking with one of these things. I mean, like I said in that video, this is something a Colorado has to fight. One of the slowest, least maneuverable ships in game that has, 16-inch guns, admittedly, that is true. She does have 16-inch guns, but she doesn't have 16-inch Soviet guns with the improved, dispersion and reload time and armor penetrate and penetration angles and all that jazz. So, yeah, this thing's pretty cracked. It's at number 4 because it is a temporary ship for now, right? Her and her 2 other experimental cousins will only be in the game until, I believe, 14.7. Then they will thankfully be removed. But right now, this thing's kind of cracked. It's in a cruiser slot, too. You can get matched up with, like, an Ibuki across the leaderboard, right? And you get this thing, or, like, the enemy team gets this thing, or the 16-inch gun cruiser, right? So it's just such a cracked ship at this moment for me that it's ridiculous it made it into the game as is. Will it get nerfed? Probably not, because it's a temporary thing, but it's just something that's just so ridiculous in my mind. It very much does belong on this list, but again, it's at number 4 because it will be, thankfully, getting removed in 14.7. All right, going our way down now to number 3, we have an older OP ship, but one that is still very much OP today, and that is the good old Tier 5 Japanese premium destroyer, the Kamikaze. The Kamikaze is a torpedo destroyer that even the likes of myself can get to work, and work quite well. The Kamikaze is just downright good in pretty much everything that she has going for her. She has 5.4 kilometer concealment at Tier 5, which means that she can, in many cases, and I've done it quite often, stealth torp other destroyers. Because at Tier 5, most destroyers, they're fairly sneaky, but they're not 5.4 kilometers sneaky, right? So you can outspot them, get your torps off on them, and most cases they'll sail right on into them because, what are they going to do from the edge of their detection range, right? So that's pretty nuts in and of itself. And her torpedo tubes, her 6 torpedo tubes, yes, she does only have 6, she has 6 tubes and 2 tubes a set for 3 sets in total. They reload in a whopping 42 seconds. Which is incredibly fast. And they hit quite hard, 14,400 maximum damage at Tier 5. Doesn't sound like a lot by Tier 10 levels, but at Tier 5, that's not bad, especially, again, for torpedoes that reload in 42 seconds, which is absurd, right? This is a tier where torpedo destroyers still, for the time being, reign supreme And I mean, again, it's a torpedo DD that can outspot and stealth torp other destroyers. Think of what it could do to cruisers and battleships. It can walk up. It can simply walk up to most battleships, sit at 5.5 kilometers, and dump all 6 torpedoes at them. And there's literally nothing the battleship player can do because they don't see it. It's at the edge of its concealment range. And now you have to deal with these 6 torpedoes coming at you from 5.5 kilometers away. It tends to not be an overly fun time. The guns of the Kamikaze also aren't half terrible either. They're more than capable of being used to finish off a destroyer that's at fairly low HP, or a cruiser, really anything that's at fairly low HP. It can, pop its guns off and finish it off. Still gets the good Japanese HE with, the great HE alpha and good fire chances and all that jazz. You get a smoke and an engine boost on top of that as well. But yeah, this is something it's just so good at just chunking torpedoes out left, right, and center that, I mean, what else do you need on a ship, right, to do well at Tier 5? Unfortunately, it has been removed from the game, so the only way you can get her, one of her variants, are in super containers, or I do believe she is still in these standard containers for the time being. But if you manage to pick one up in one of those methods, or however you manage to pick one up, you have a very good Tier 5 torpedo boat on your hands. And keep in mind, too, that Tier 5 matchmaking, bots are a thing at Tier 5. And bots in random battles, they give you the exact same amount of credits as real players do. So this thing's a pretty good money printer right now if you get into a bot match at Tier 5. And keep in mind, too, this thing's down at Tier 5. Within its matchmaking bracket, you don't really have a whole lot of, like radar, even at Tier 7. I mean, there's a few more ships now than back in the day that have radar at Tier 7, but still not a whole lot. So Kamikaze, for the most part, still has free reign in her matchmaking bracket and is a very scary ship to see as a Tier 5 battleship on the other team, right? So that's the Kamikaze coming in at number 3. Number 2 belongs to the Tier 10 Japanese steel aircraft carrier, the Shinano. Man, the Shinano, this thing is quite good at abusing other ships. The Shinano is pretty dang terrifying. She's the first ship in the game to get AP skip bombers, which are utterly insane. So, skip bombers, as I'm sure most of you know, they work by planes flying low, dropping bombs, and the bombs bounce across the ocean and then impact the side of the target ship. Was a real method used in real life to Wargaming's credit, so fair enough on them for that. Now, we've had HE skip bombers, which hurt. They deliver high levels of HE alpha damage on top of fires to the enemy ship. But fires are fully repairable. Citadel damage, on the other hand, that's can't fully repair the damage that Citadels do to you, unlike you can do with the fire damage that HE bombs do to you, right? So that kind of sucks. And the Shinano is more than capable of ripping off 14,400 Citadel damage from the target ship in one pass if all 3 of her bombs Citadel the target. That's friggin' terrifying, right? And the way the skip bombs work on the Shinano, the third line, the furthest line out from your aircraft, you use that to hit, cruisers and lightly armored targets, like maybe some battle cruisers, but mostly cruisers. The middle line, so the second line from furthest out, that is the line that you typically use on most aircraft carriers, battle cruisers, and most battleships in-game. The closest line to the planes, the first line, if you will, that's the line you use for the ultra-thick boys. So, things like the Kremlin and, like, the GK, things that you get a lot of armor to get through, since those bombs have the highest velocity coming off of the aircraft, right? So, the idea is the further away you are from the planes, the more time you have to maneuver. And yeah, if you do manage to maneuver and angle to the skip bombs, they won't do that much damage to you. But my god, if you slip up, if you aren't paying attention, if you're forced to be bow tanking to something else and these planes get your side, you're probably losing 14,000 damage in one run. There's not a whole lot you can do about it, unfortunately. And again, this is 14,000 Citadel damage per run. And she has, I think 3 or 4 attacking squadrons in a flight. So Yeah, this thing can do some stupid stuff to other ships. I myself have deleted cruisers from pretty much full health, maybe like 2/3 health with one run with this thing because of, again, how crazy the AP is on the ship. It's not a good time going up against this in like a light cruiser or something, because light cruisers by tier 10 standards, like 14-ish thousand damage. It's like what, half health? You can wipe someone out in one run with that. With the Shinano, it's pretty dang terrifying, right? But not even just her AP bombers, her torpedoes are actually pretty dang solid as well. They are a nice fallback on for good, consistent damage. The torpedoes are relatively fast. They're relatively easy to get off. They have a good, tight group on them. And, I'll bounce back between those two most of the match. You also get a tactical squadron with some HE dive bombers for targets with lots of real estate, like GK, right? And those planes do also get the smoke screen that you can use to smoke up your teammates, to smoke up yourself if you find yourself in a pretty unfavorable situation. And again, the HE bombers are not bad either. And these are a tactical squadron, so it doesn't matter if you lose all the planes or if you keep most of the planes intact. You get them back, and I think it's like 2 minutes and change either way. You start the match with a squadron of them spawned in already, so there is that. The Shinano herself does actually have pretty dang good secondary. She's ironically the best high-tier secondary Japanese capital ship. So when we say we wanted a secondary Japanese ship wargaming at high tier, I guess it's good they can listen to us in some way because the Shinano is pretty good at it. But I think we're meaning more of like a battleship type deal rather than the Shinano. So there's that. Shinano was, of course, a real still historical ship. She was the 4th Yamato class laid down, almost completed, then converted into an aircraft carrier. I think when she was like around 70, 80-ish% complete. So it's a real still historical ship. It's always nice seeing these things in game. But absolutely, she is way overtuned with those AP skip bombers. If I had a crystal ball, I'd like to think that it would say the Shinano's being nerfed in the future. But she's been out for a few months now. Not much has changed on her so far. By not much, I mean anything. So here's hoping. But might be another couple of months before we hear something about that. Speaking of the Shinano, our number 1 slot belongs to the Tier 10 American steel submarine, the Archerfish, Shinano's counterpart. So the Archerfish is the real still U.S. Navy submarine that was responsible for sinking the Shinano. The Archerfish endgame was released alongside with the Shinano. She's a Bleo-class submarine. And unlike the, not the Gato, the Bleo in game. She's not in her Guppy conversion. This is the, World War II or early World War II, version of the Bleo class subs. She doesn't have that, upgraded superstructure. She still has her deck guns. So that's cool and all. And she has like every single friggin' consumable that submarines have in game with her. She's got the battery, the backup battery. She's got the engine boost. She's got the heel, all that jazz. And of course, submarine surveillance bolted to her decks because why not? She's also really friggin' quick on the surface and at periscope depth. If you have the enlarged propeller shaft and you have the engine boost going, you're doing 44 knots top speed with a signal flag, right? 44 knots on the surface or at periscope depth, which is, of course, beyond absurd. Because at periscope depth, you have like a 2.2 kilometer detection range. Now you're ripping and roaring at 44 knots. That's absurd. Good luck trying to predict that with your ASW planes, right? That's ridiculous. And even when you're turning, like the U-4501, the other what used to be the fastest submarine in the game, the 4501 first off had to be underwater to reach her top speed of around 38, 39 knots. And if you dared breathe on your A or D key in the 4501, the speed bleed rate in the turns was so bad, you'd be going 20 knots the second you simply thought about clicking on your rudder key. Not the Archerfish. You can rock and roll in turns going like 31 knots, which is, of course, downright absurd. Her torpedoes hit pretty hard as well, the unguided torpedoes or the homing torpedoes. But on top of all of that, she gets combat instructions. And the requirements to activate her combat instructions are so friggin' low. All you gotta do is either land 2 torpedoes, because each torpedo hit gives you a 50% boost to your combat instructions bar, or receive 3,000 potential damage. That's right, you essentially get shot at twice in the Archerfish, and your combat instructions pop, which gives you a 17% buff to the reload time of your torpedo tubes and to your consumables. So, yeah, by literally getting 2 torpedo hits or being shot at twice, you now have a boost to your consumable reload time and your torpedo tubes reload time. And it's automatically applied by the game because I guess you don't have time to push that F button when you're playing a submarine. Now, I've seen some absolutely absurd matches come out of the Archerfish, 200,000+ damage games in a submarine, which is just beyond ridiculous, right? She's a crazy ship. I mean, think about this too, The main complaint about submarines right now, encountering them, is that they're too maneuverable when trying to predict where they're going to be with your ASW aircraft. And here we have a submarine that can rock and roll in turns going 30+ knots with the speed boost activated. That's just absurd. Now, it is still a submarine. It is still quite frail. And it is, well, not that great at... Well, it has a long underwater time, right? But it takes forever for the battery to recharge. It's got one of the slowest battery regeneration rates out of any of the submarines. I think you have to stay on the surface for like 5 seconds to get 1 second underwater or something ridiculous like that. So it does take quite a long time to build back up your underwater time, but again, you have a pretty big capacity starting out, and you do get the backup battery consumable to extend your time underwater even further. So there's a little bit of balance thrown in there. You, of course, have to be on the surface to use the heal anyway, too. So it's not all crazy, but it's pretty freaking crazy in my mind, and more than crazy enough to earn a #1 spot on this list. So guys, let me know what you guys think about this list in the comments down below. What ships would you add to? What ships would you remove from it? Let me know all that and more down below. Don't forget to check out the Missouri video. Link to that, again, will be back in that section. We'll have a link to it here at the end of the video as well. Hope you guys have a wonderful Monday and a wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.